having an engaging conversation with them. Now, without further ado, allow me to invite my panelists for the day. To begin with, Dr. Angelina Miso, who is the Assistant Director of ICT Systems and Compliance Services at the Ministry of Communication and Information Technology. Karibu sana, Doctor. Thank you. Our second speaker of the day is Mr. Sebastian Marondo, the CEO of BTX Tanzania Limited, who is leading the integration of ICT solutions into key productive sectors of the economy. Karibu sana, Sebastian. And our third speaker for the day is my learned sister, Advocate Fatma Songoro, who is the head of technology and IT at Victory Attorneys. She's an expert in technology law, fintech regulation, and digital compliance. Karibu sana, Fatma. Right. Now, to kick off our conversation, I'm going to throw a general question, and any of our panelists can decide to take up the question. Now, as I've said before, as multi-million-dollar data centers aggressively expand across the continent, how does this physical localization of the infrastructure shift the geopolitical power dynamics of internet governance and data sovereignty? In short, as Africa builds more advanced, local data centers, how does keeping the infrastructure inside Africa change who has power over African data? Any of my panelists can decide to take up that question. I see Dr. has decided to be the first. Thank you.
Maybe I'll start.
Thank you.
A lovely good afternoon to you all. As I've been introduced, I serve as the Assistant Director for ICT Systems Development and Compliance Services at the Ministry of ICT in Tanzania, but I also coordinate the establishment of an institution called NDTI, National Digital Training Institute, which is to be built in Dodoma. This will be spearheading digital transformation, but also capacitating our people, especially the youth, in digital technologies. Well, to answer your very good question, well, I think the key word there is digital sovereignty. When you're able to build your own infrastructure, especially digital, you're now shifting from being a user or a consumer of digital services to being the one who makes the decisions. Africa has come a long way. Let me speak about Tanzania. We have Tier 3 data centers in the country. Actually, we have the one hosted by NIDC and another one by IGA. These are hosting government services. They well equipped, and so we are able to host our own services but also provide for government institutions, especially, for example, IGA offers software as a services. So us as government institutions are able to use uniform. There are some services, for example, e-office, government mail, which are being hosted by IGA but are also used across the services. What does this mean? Data is very, very important. There's a version, data is like blood to the human body. Data is the new gold. So when you're able to host your own data, store and process it, this is very, very critical. Gives you power. So I'll put it that way. Thank you very much.
Sovereignty.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Do any of the other panelists want to take up that question? Thank you, Sebastian.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. So first of all, Neema, we just need to put everything clear because I have heard the conversation here and many people are confused in a lot of things. We have data centers, but we don't have a really at that level that we are looking at. If you count the data center that we have in Tanzania and the data center we are talking about, Tier 3 level here, I think we have less than 5 in Tanzania. But we can have about 15 data centers around Tanzania. But with the actual capacity, we have less than 5. And I want to break it for somebody who has came here today to understand exactly data center. We are talking about the ability of a room to power particular machines. And for a standard data center that we are talking today world, we measure it by using what is called megawatts. The megawatts simply is like 1,000 kilowatts. It means that the house is able to power a machine that can consume about 1,000 kilowatts. And for a simple way, one server, for example, one server, it uses about 500 watts if it's powered on. So if you are talking about 1 megawatts data center, you are simply talking about 2,000 servers which can be plugged in to that room. And those are the old debate. This is a national economic development debate. Because now data center, they carry the same level with ports, same level with railway, same level with airport, as what we used to see in the past. If you have a railway, airport, then you can now speak about how you control the world. So today, who has the data center of the standard, they control the tomorrow's wealth. And that's why you see our neighbors, they're struggling on how to pull in this really investment on data center. Let me pause there first. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Sebastian, for just that breakdown for us. But also, I'm seeing potential. You know, with the growth in demand, there's also a potential for us to also take ownership in there. But are we ready to take ownership, as you've said? What's required to even expand on the data centers? And just to sort of unpack that a little bit further, especially in your field. I know that your firm integrates digital transformation into traditional sectors like mining and agriculture. Now, how is this localization of the local infrastructure directly impacting your operations and the efficiency of your operations in these industries, especially the heavy industries?
Yeah, thank you. Apart from this government data center, basically, we are talking about commercial data centers that they need to empower the digital economy. Let's forget a little bit about the government data center. We are talking about heavy data center to power the digital economy, not only for government services. And to add on that is that even if these investors who are coming into Africa, the issue is not whether the server is in Tanzania. The issue is who controls the server. Because you can have the data in your house. You can have the data here in Tanzania. But actually the GPU will not sit here because it's very expensive as you grow and as the demand increases. And the second thing is that even the model for the AI, you have to buy it. Who programmed the thinking, again, controls you. If you buy 100 robots from China, and they work here, physically they're here. But who is controlling this brain? Who is updating this? Who programmed the thinking? So the question is, it's even beyond. It's not just physically that we see the data here. It's actually now about more than that. But speaking about localization, that gave us a little bit of impulse in terms of, costs. There's a number of things which shifted to us. And I will unpack it in this way. In mining, for example, in logistics, for example, in agriculture. Here we speak about big data. You know, in mining, you speak about 1,000 to 10,000 sensors that they need to work in real time. So that's prediction, maintenance. You need to be ahead of time, in terms of maintenance and decision. Decision need to be fast. And when you have local server that is hosted here and working here, that means you reduce the latency. They call it latency. Simply is the time it takes to request from your phone when you request something to the time that the response comes. This normally takes around few milliseconds. So if the server is in US, it will take about 150 milliseconds. If it is here, it will take about 5 milliseconds. So this decision in mining is very critical. It's about life. It's about 100,000 of saving of money in terms of that decision, because you need to work on preventive maintenance and in real time. So we are looking on if the data, they are here in Tanzania, you save the time, you save the quick time turnaround, but also you save the issue of availability, because now you will not depend on the fiber. If it's cut, at least you can continue because the server will be here. So these are the localization will enable us to be able to have even decision, as she said, my colleague here. But actually the most important is that if it's here, it's managed by who in terms of application and the infrastructure itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sebastian. Now, we've seen that how efficiently localization affects real-time operations, and Mr. Sebastian has tried to break that down for us from his experience. Now, let's look at the legal side. Advocate Fatma. With physical infrastructure expanding, and we've seen the need to continue expanding that, especially in Tanzania, what commercial and legal frameworks must be instituted to govern local data hosting agreements and ensure SLA compliances?
Thank you, Nema. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all enjoying your evening. So maybe before I respond, anyone in the room maybe who has worked in a data center or no? Okay. So when it comes to your question specifically, currently in Tanzania, we have, I would say, three statutes. We have the Tanzania Communication Regulatory Authority, brackets, public center rules that provide for public data center. We have the minimum technical standard for data center, and then we have the minimum standard for public data center. And so if you look at this, I would say, regulation, they give you an insight of the standard, the requirement of this data center. If you look at the rules for public data center, I think under Rule 8, it mandates that anyone who is licensed as a public center, they need to have a service level agreement with the people who they're providing those services to. I think to your question, normally from the regulatory perspective or policy, the law would not prescribe or give like a template for the agreement. So there is normally room for the parties, but there are standards that are set there. And if you look further into that rule, it provides for certain aspects that you can say would normally need to be in the agreement. So I feel like that will be the template for it. There's a part that speaks to, one, liability and indemnity. And I think this is one of the clauses that is normally tricky. So if you're a lawyer and you're reviewing a service levy or a master agreement for, with regard to data service, normally as lawyers, you either be on the data center or your client is the one getting the services. So there's always looking at which side you're in. But the law says that if, and unless otherwise agreed, the data center carries the liability for any damage or loss that occurs out in providing their services out of their own act. And so this means that if you're doing any agreement with a data center your client is getting, you need to, if now I'm the data center, I think I will need to ensure that maybe I keep a limit to that, because that's a wide liability clause. But that is how. So if it's not stated otherwise in the agreement, it means that the data center will carry that liability. And then the law also speaks about making insurance disclosures. So the law says that if someone comes to get maybe hosting services from you, if you have an insurance, you need to tell them maybe if your insurance, the exposure that it covers. So someone is able to understand what is the risk maybe that they will be exposed, or if they can take another insurance, or if they can take another measure. And so the law also keeps that as another requirement. But then the other thing that I like, and these rules for public data center, I think they came out in March 2026, so they're still new. And I think in the past, when I had clients getting services from public data center, would always have back and forth on so many things. One being how the data is treated. So there's a provisional for personal data protection in the rules that says if you're a public data center, you do not have the right to to access or to use that data unless you have the consent from the data subject. And so this clearly keeps the personal data protection framework in between the service provider and the entity that is providing data to these data centers. And I think part of, when we speak about this agreement, most of the time, I understand they're normally standard form that most public data centers would have. but I think it's important to really go clause by clause to review them. Most people have a master service agreement, and then they'll have a service level agreement. So the service level agreement will speak to like the uptime, because as the previous speaker said, most of the data centers, they're like 4 tiers. So there's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, and I think in the country, we don't have a tier 4, but each tier has specific technical requirement and standard, and so normally they'll provide for those in the service level, like the downtime, the availability, and all this. So it will be in the service level, and then they'll have an access maybe user agreement, and then they'll have an extra for like data protection. So normally it can be a master service agreement with all these other annexures in it. And I think that's just briefly what I would say, but there will be a lot. The agreements are normally very well detailed. You'll find those small words, so it will be a very long contract, but it's quite good to always read through every clause. And I think just recently I had a client, they host certain sensitive data, and so we had a lot of back and forth, almost 2 weeks of going back and forth, but we managed to change the clauses. And so for anyone who is either getting the services from a data center, or if you're a data center, you just need to ensure that the agreement is framed in a way that protects you and you're aware of your liability and your exposures. So maybe I'll pause there.
Yeah, thank you. I have a follow-up question on the efficiency of the updated rules, but I will come back to you. Now, moving back to Dr. Angelina, as Tanzania advances its digital transformation agenda, what role do locally hosted data centers and cloud infrastructure play in strengthening national digital sovereignty? We talked about that, security, but also economic development.
Thank you very much. I would say the role is basically on as a strategic enabler. How should I put it? This enables for sensitive data systems and applications, for example, financial systems, digital identity systems, health records, to be hosted and stored within the country's borders and everything. So this, for example, let's say NIDA hosts data for digital identity. And through that, public and private sectors are able to do KYC, know your customer, for example, when you're registering for your SIM card or your bank account. So imagine if we didn't have that data center here. Where are we going to store such information? So that is very critical and sensitive information. So having these infrastructure is key. But having data centers alone is not efficient. That's the whole thing, no. We also need to strengthen our infrastructure. We need to have optical fiber backbones to ensure, because you have data somewhere here, but how do you ensure last mile connectivity to the end user? So still the government is doing efforts to ensure that we have all means of communications, whether it's communication towers, optic fiber, we also have submarine cables to link Tanzania to the world, and so forth. So this goes hand in hand with other initiatives in the ecosystem. Furthermore, things like regulatory frameworks. How do we ensure the private sector works with us, also helps in improving service delivery? Because actually, one of our mottos is to ensure enhanced service delivery. Because when we talk about interoperable systems, how does the last citizen, the citizen who uses, experience that interoperable system? It's through having enhanced service delivery. There were people here during the morning sessions who were saying that you have to submit your documents over and over again. So when we have servers, data centers, and everything, which are communicating now with reliable infrastructure between different institutions, then we can definitely have that. And also the principle of once only that was also mentioned, like you're able to share your data once, and after that, everybody else can source your data from that single source of truth, we call it. So it's a couple of things that work together. We call this concept of whole of a government approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. There's a lot of things that are interconnected to ensure the success of it. But coming back to Mr. Sebastian, I know you've talked about the efficiency of localization. But if we could expound it a little bit, in what ways do you think sovereign data centers act as fundamental enablers for the broader physical economy, but also national export competitiveness? You talked about comparison with different countries.
Yeah, I'm very worried about this. This is a very serious debate. This is not ICT. It's actually national development and economic issue.
Absolutely.
I've been in the industry for 26 years, I would say, probably. I have got an opportunity to see how infrastructure is actually enabling the economy of country. And this is not a joke. Actually, we can talk data center. I went through the life where I was using floppy. Anybody may be, you know, floppy, 1.4 megabits MB. That was a storage. We were proud, like, I have a big storage. You know, and my computer, which I was using to code by then, it was 128 MB storage. You can imagine. So I went from seeing that and actually seeing that server room, from the server room to a data center, and now I have seen how economy has transformed. Now, when you speak about AI, actually I'm getting scared, because whoever will control the infrastructure tomorrow will control the economy. This is a danger. This is actually a big discussion. And it's not a discussion about ICT or a particular sector. It's about national discussion. We want to take a stake about the economy across Africa, across America. We need to be able to protect and to build it now. Let me say something. Maybe you remember when, if you studied your history in the past, you remember that people, they were building infrastructure in the past. Railway were built to carry goods from Africa to Frankfurt, carry goods from Africa to somewhere. Ports were built to ship goods. They were never built to bring goods to Africa. If we are not so careful, we may also build today, but yet to carry our intelligence and our experience away from Tanzania. And that will mean that we cannot compete. You get my point? So even if you say you're going to have physical data center here, sovereignty that you are talking about, we need to go beyond the data. And this is what the doctor has said as well. Look here, when we speak about the AI, we have three components. And I will give this good example for somebody who is not technological to understand. Any country in the past which used to have fuel, used to be known to be like, is a wealthy country. But if that fuel is just oil, crude oil underground, they are still as poor if it's not extracted. So our data, even if you have your data stored here, it's like a crude oil underground. When you bring about AI, it's just like you're bringing about refinery, you see? And that AI platform is not something simple to run, because the GPU they were discussing here, it's cost millions of dollars. I want to say this. It's cost millions of dollars. This GPU they were discussing here the other time. And those are set of machines that when you ask AI today, your ChatGPT, the server that runs that decision and give you the answer is the one that runs under what is called GPU. You get my point? Which is very expensive machine. And for you to get a very clear real-time intelligence, it needs to sum a lot of knowledge and information at the same time. That's why we say capacity of this machine. So whoever have this processing power actually has ability to drive the decision of the data. And on top of that, what we say the AI application and whatsoever, it's like when you do the delivery on fuel, and you play the data, is not here. I just want to say this. It's not here. Because of the computing power, they need to hire it from somewhere else, and data should be locally. And now, when we say we are building data center here, we need to consider a number of things. One, are we African owning this data center? It's not let's put aside the government data center, please, because this is a little bit different. this carries the e-government activity, which actually interconnect with the digital economy that we talk about here. But if you want to talk about the private data center that will be able to drive the demand of everybody else, then we need to look on how they're being built and how are being owned. Because you can have investor building the data center here. Physically, it's here. But actually, the key decision maker is not these people here. It's not African. And second, even the staff that they're operating, they're not to say. We need to make sure African are owning. They take ownership of this infrastructure. Whoever controls the railway, whoever controls the port, whoever controls the airport, actually control the economy of a place. Tomorrow, if we don't have this kind of capability of this data center of the level we are talking about here, I want to tell you, we will keep buying and buying and buying, paying a lot of services outside there because we won't be able to handle the demand locally. And what does that mean? If we go by protecting our borders and not open to this competing power that is available somewhere else, our economy will not be competitive. And that's so important to consider and to discuss even now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sebastian. And I love your historical analogy that whoever owns the railway, whoever owns the port, owns the goods. So again, a repeating theme around the discussion from our panelists is that sovereignty is important, but are we ready and capable to actually promote that sovereignty of our local data centers? Now, let's talk a little bit about international corporations. Fatma, I know that you work with a number of international corporates. I'm inclined to believe that majority of your clients would be international corporations. You correct me if I'm wrong. Now, how do they navigate the intersection of Tanzanians' national data protection laws, but also at the same time they are involved with, they utilize global cloud. So how do they navigate the two?
Hello? Okay. So I think when it comes to international entities, the good thing I would say is that most of them already come with an awareness of or understanding of the need to protect data. Whether you're coming from EU, there's GDPR has been there for so long. Whether you're coming from America, there's quite an understanding. And so it's normally an easy process when you tell someone that you need to do 1, 2, 3, rather than a company who is operating maybe from here. This is normally a new concept, like they've never had it. And so most of them, of course, when it comes to data protection specifically, they are willing to comply. They understand the risk and they understand the need to comply. And I think when you look at how the data protection framework is, there's no a clear requirement for data localization, like your data has to stay here. However, they're just key compliances that you have to do. So the law requires you, let's say, to have, if you want to transfer data outside Tanzania, you get a cross-border approval from the Personal Data Protection Commission. You need to have your data protection policy. It's a requirement of the law. They're always willing to do that. You need to take into all these other requirement or the data protection principles. So when it comes to security, do you have the technical and organization measures in place? And they are always willing. I think for most of the time, international organization, when they're entering into a sector with the requirement for data localization is normally where it becomes tricky when you tell them that you have to locally host your data. So talk about the finance sector, because there is a clear requirement to localize data. And I think the law says, if you read the law, that you need a primary data center to be here in Tanzania. And so that is where maybe most of the time the international entities, they doubt the centers that are here, and they would normally prefer to have that data sitting in the cloud or in other data centers that they use. But because if you're an investor coming into the country, you have to comply with the law. There are no exemptions to that. BOT is quite strict. I think the other sector is health. I don't know if there's a law that says that data has to stay here when it comes to health data, but I know in the sector that is the standard that is there. And so even when investors are coming into that sector, that is where they would normally consider. And so data protection being new in the country, I think it's quite easy for someone to come in and jump in and get into compliance. There are several maybe some part of compliance that seem to be very different from other jurisdictions. If you read the law, there's a requirement to file quarterly reports. That is something that would normally shock most of the international entities, that I need to file quarterly reports every time. The requirement to have a data protection officer, because in some jurisdiction, maybe it's limited to entities with certain turnovers or certain operations, but here everyone needs a data protection officer, so that's another compliance I would say that normally maybe they would it will be new, and so maybe that's also something that they will speak about. But I think also because some of them would come here and get the comfort that we have. I think Liquid has AWS like as here in Tanzania, and so when they realized that they could get someone who from the international space, but they have partnered with Liquid here, then they get that comfort of, okay, would maybe opt for this. And so I would say for international entities, there's always willingness and quite eagerness to do the compliance. So it's not as difficult as for most entities who are locally maybe here.
Right, so it's just a matter of balancing it, ensuring that they are actually compliant with the national laws, even though they're utilizing global cloud hosting platforms. Right, now going back to Dr. Angelina, from a systems development and compliance perspective, I know that Fatma has talked about a number of guidelines and laws that are there to govern or set the standards, but then what policy, regulatory or technical standards do you think are still necessary to create a trusted environment for investment in data centers and cloud services across Tanzania?
Thank you very much. Let me start with the overarching policies. We have the Tanzania Development Vision 2050. In this document, it is outlined that by 2050, we should have 80% of public services being offered through digital systems. It also outlines that by 2050, 70% of the population should be digital aware, savvy, and competent to be able to use these digital systems. So what does this entail? We should have human-centered or systems that can be easily used by our people. So we need to develop systems that can be easily accessible and used by this generation of people that we are creating to be competent. We also have a Tanzania Digital Economy Strategic Framework, which is a 10-year strategy launched in 2024 by Her Excellency Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan. It goes from 2024 to 2034. This document has 6 pillars. The first pillar actually, and one of the most important, it talks about the infrastructure. It talks about the ICT infrastructure, including data centers, but also communication infrastructure. But it goes further. It not only outlines the ICT infrastructure and telecoms, but it also talks about the energy and powering systems, because these are very important in order to have the ICT ones in place. So it also outlines the strategy on how we are able to achieve this. And it's not just about power, but also green technologies. Because when we talk about AI, as has been previously mentioned here by my colleagues, a lot of power will be needed. So where do we get this power? How do we able to get this infrastructure and technology that we want to have in our country to be effectively used and utilized by our people? So yes, having those overarching policies and documentations, but narrowing down, like has been previously mentioned, we have the Personal Data Protection Act of 2022. This is very, very important. When we talk about trusted systems, I, as a citizen, need to be able to know and feel safe that when I share my health data, it's safe where it is. Nobody else will be able to know about my health status unless I give my consent. So we need to build systems also under the regulations and guidelines that protect citizens' data. And of course, we need these systems to be interoperable, but also sharing data. But what data is it being shared? Am I aware? Am I informed? And do I know where it is being used? Yes, because when I feel safe, then I can easily share my data. Again, we also the Cyber Security Act and regulations are also in place. So all these, among others, are very, very important to ensure we have a resilient, robust, safe ecosystem where we have ICT systems in place, but they are also secure. Let me just outline one important thing. I think my colleague, because we work from the same ministry, Daniel Sarungi, mentioned about the Jamii stack and everything. So just to outline, I'll further explain a bit. The Jamii stack is like a roadmap where us as the government shows our steps on how we are able to reach the promised land when it comes to ICT. So we outline what are the steps, and this isn't like our own just innovation. It's something that's being done globally. For example, Europe have GovStack. We have India. India has India Stack, and they have outlined important things. It has a number of layers. So in our Tanzania technology stack, also known as Jamii Stack, we wanted to have a Swahili name for it, Jamii, because it means community, because everybody is involved. So on the bottom layer, we have things like, we call it the enabling layer. Why enabling? It includes issues of infrastructure, it includes policies, regulations, and guidelines, but it also includes human capacity development. Because we might have all the infrastructure investment and everything, but if our people are not well informed, we'll have to import people from outside. So we need to invest in our own people. And then we also talk about issues of innovations, very, very critical. And then we have another layer where we talk about DPI, digital public infrastructure. Here is where we have digital identity, we have digital financial systems, we have digital platforms for data exchange. So this middle layer is where we have things like TIPS, Tanzania Instant Payment System. When we have the DPI in place, that's where we have the collaboration, for example, the public and private sector, where we can share and exchange data, for example. And then the upper layer, that's where we call it the application layer. This is where we have different applications across sectors. Because now I have my DPI in place, I have my infrastructure in place, I have my policy and guidelines, I have my infrastructure in place. How do I use a combination of all these things to create user-centered services? That's where I'm able to use as a citizen, for example, a portal to access services from the government or the private sector. So this is the upper layer, which directly now links to the final citizens who will be using the system. So apart from all these initiatives, we thought it is also important to include a roadmap to show where we are and where we're going. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And I would say that we are well ahead in our way to creating this, the policies and the regulatory standards that really create trust to the even the ordinary citizen. But then let's go back to the infrastructure, Mr. Sebastian. What do you think are some of the infrastructure deficits, especially as a player in this field, that are currently hindering the development of advanced ICT tracking and logistics solutions in cross-border trade? I know you've touched a little bit in some of your responses, but let's dive into that. Transparency.
But you mentioned about logistics, now I need to speak in more of interest of economy. So having been working on ICT for the past, and now I became like a business person, I look to IT infrastructure as, not just as a project. I look at it as, they really roads. There's no difference between data center we are talking here with the road from here to Tunduma. The same investments you are talking about the road, it should be the same discussion that the country should be discussing about the data center. That has the ability to carry our data and our decision on timely. And that's number one. So when you talk about logistics, as we mentioned, our transportation to go to other countries, they need speed. They need a lot of data. In fact, there are so many data that goes around, and there's so much cost that goes around. And now this challenge does not become the logistic, it becomes the national economy challenge. You see now, because when you speak about GPS, for example, these are the sensors, a lot of number of sensors. You need to have a time decision. You need to have borders which actually have a single sign on. You know, not just theoretically. You need really, if a truck lives here, by any assumption, you have just cleared the document at a point A. You need to go all the way. You don't need to wait in all the borders that we are still here. So we speak about AI, speed, economy in other countries going so fast, and we are still on mechanical, despite of saying we have automated level A and B. This is not the discussion how much of automated. It's how much the rest of the people are now moving. Because here you find with the logistic, despite this, a lot of systems, there's no integrations. Tanzania border to Zambia border, these are different countries, different systems. To Congo borders, different systems. But we find that it is our role to take advantage of automation, not just road, automation of these neighboring countries. Because if we can control the automation, we can really control the economy. So I would say, I don't want to talk about touch my government and the data center. But let's speak about how do we power Tanzania in terms of infrastructure. And to the level that as we speak about ports, we should speak about data center. That's power the neighbor countries. I tell you, people with the ports today, they will not be as competent as people who will have the real data center by next few years. They will control everything. So we need to wake up. And this is not just government, it's about all the stakeholders to look on how strategically we are able to get advantage of these neighboring countries to open the infrastructure, not just the roads and the railways, but now technology. I heard one company that was about to launch a data center here in Tanzania. They say in 2026. I haven't seen them launched yet, but they promised to come up with a 6 megawatts data center. That sounded really like a serious, a little bit, to speak. That means we're going to have around 9 to 10. Yes, we can now host this GPU that we are speaking about. And that's a serious investment. It's a serious investment. My worry is not that it's coming. My worry is who is going to own it. Because if we don't have even stake to control the board, it means, again, another problem. Another problem. So these are the things that we need to speak because they take a really investment cost as we speak about the rest of infrastructure. So when you speak about the corridor, open corridor, you cannot speak it without open infrastructure. And this, we are speaking about the GPS, the sensor, the cameras. We move, for example, I will give you an example. Let me speak a little bit for somebody who wants to understand clear. What does the border does? A truck coming from Congo, for example, normally carry what is called copper, the copper cathodes, for those who have gone to chemistry. These cathodes, they are like 30 tons. Normally, this truck is worth around $500,000 US. This is the truck. It has a driver who is a Form 4. The truck itself is around 2 million to 3 million Tanzania shillings. So this driver has a lot of has cameras, and sometimes he has a lot of GPS, because if this consignment is taken, it means the owner of the truck needs to pay, or rather the insurance company needs to pay. And there's a lot of risk. And you find that they will stay somewhere waiting for a border to cross border for about a month in a bush. You find a truck also even leaving Tanzania here, going that side. They will remain in Tunduma for 7 days and so forth. So if we try to work around on real-time data, we need to make sure, as you leave Dar es Salaam, Tunduma knows, Zambia knows, Congo knows, so that if you check, like we are saying, the single information identification, you go there, you say, this is my ID or my document number, then just proceed. What happened now for your information, despite all the noise that you are making? You go by document to a particular border, Tunduma, that is cancellation. You start another process to another country. So I see this is where now the really automation comes in and big data comes in. Because without having this ability to make quick and real-time data, you won't be able to move. And actually, there's an additional information coming. I think EU has passed another act to track the minerals. So as the mineral moving around, there's a lot of data that need to be added on it, and even agriculture. So the agriculture also need to be tracked. So we have a lot of data that is coming up. So we don't want, I don't want to see we buying the infrastructure service from another country today or tomorrow. Because if we start like that, it means that we will keep becoming a slave. Our economy will go out. And this is about $80 million projected market share in next few years. It means that we will have to consume $80 million for these services of AI. So it means if you don't tap it now, it will go out. And it's even going out. If you're using AI and you have just commercialized, you have paid for a license, it means that it has gone to America. That's what you are paying. You are paying for that decision. Even if it's $10 per week, you are paying for that decision to somebody who has hosted that GPU somewhere. So let's not talk about the houses and the few computers. We are talking about infrastructure that power the country and give us, number one, negotiation power. If we want to talk with the investor and these people across our region, if we control computing ability and data, we can negotiate better. And we can have trust of the investor coming here because now we have infrastructure. We won't be checked like maybe, maybe. No, they will come. And the rest of the things, job creation will come. Because again, if you have this infrastructure and people are working remotely to drive this infrastructure, it doesn't make any sense. Job creation will come. And now, the issue of bringing the application and actually preparing our people not to just do the normal application, but to take advantage of AI, the intelligence. Because one thing that we need to take care, Neema, is that there's confidentiality information. This is a national security. There's a confidentiality information of Tanzania that gives us the advantage to compete somewhere. Are we together? So if you have a mining sector doing exploration somewhere, and they have a lot of mining research, which are really confidential, and they need to put it on a particular server, if they put it outside and somebody got access to that data, it means they lost all the exploration project because all the data has gone. And a lot of data now are on the cloud because they need a lot of knowledge to analyze, to do everything. So if we become strategically investing on this infrastructure, the trust would be so heavy. And even we can control so much which leaves our country and which come to our country. And we can negotiate heavily. So I want to see Africa and particularly Tanzania not depending, because now we have a stage to project next 2050, right? We are talking about. So we can even project 10 years in 10 years and see where we're going to tap on the AI technology. Otherwise, we will be having still the infrastructure, but we will still depend on other people.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sebastian. I see that we have a lot of work in terms of improving in our infrastructure to promote sovereignty, but also to ensure that we're becoming competitive on issues even like automation, improving efficiency in these projects, but with things that also affect our nation's economy. I hope we've also all taken the challenge as all stakeholders, but also even the participants as well, and we hope to see the future of growth in our infrastructures in Tanzania. Now, coming back to the regulatory side and the legal side, it's also a very important aspect in terms of localization. You talked about the fintech industry being one of the most regulated in terms of localization and data management and handling. Now, how can these fintech regulations, especially when you said that the BOT mandates hosting of that data in Tanzania, how can these regulations evolve to mandate local data hosting without increasing the operational cost, which is ultimately usually passed down to the consumer?
So I think to that question, I struggle to have a reply to it. When you talk about fintech and the requirement to host data locally, taking into account that the infrastructure, all these data centers, they sit with another ministry, another regulatory body. And so if we have data centers locally whereby hosting is expensive, maybe I would say the regulatory fee for those data center up, what makes the cost up? Can we lower those costs? That is one way I can look. But I also have a question. Maybe Sebastian would have an answer. Is it always expensive to host data locally than outside the country? Like, is it cheaper? Or is there an assumption? I don't know the numbers, but maybe he does. But so I would say, one, let's look at the regulatory framework when it comes to licensing and the operation of these data centers within the country. I don't know if there is a difference in fee between the centers, data centers that are run by private entity or the ones that are under the government. I don't know if there's a difference in cost. Maybe the government has lower prices. I don't know, but maybe that's also something whereby the government can work towards providing that services, maybe for startups or fintech in order they have lower costs, and so the consumer doesn't carry out more cost. I also think just a few weeks ago, we were discussing about the East Africa AI strategy. And so they were talking about infrastructure. And if you read through the strategy, it speaks about building regional cloud computing centers to kind of build the capacity within the region. It speaks about having a data center that within all national, each country, the national data, like operating and keeping in regional data center, with the hope that maybe it might lower cost, it might allow us to have a tier 4 data center and all this. And so maybe at a regional level, we also need to look beyond just country level, and maybe that law needs to require data localization within the region. Maybe it would help, but I would say that's one way in which we can explore. And I think for the fintech who are in the country, because they can also look at it that much as the law requires data localization, not all their information and data falls within that spectrum. You'll probably have other data that can sit outside the local data center, but normally most people would, if they have their data center here, they'll have like a replica, a backup center in another jurisdiction. And so part of it, or part of strategizing for the fintech, is just also, I would say, taking that hybrid approach whereby part of the data sits locally, other data that doesn't have to sit here doesn't sit here if it saves cost. But I think when we speak about cost, it comes down to the actual figure in numbers and the cost for each option that you want to explore. So yeah, but I'd like to hear from maybe Sebastian or Doctor if they have any input with regard to the cost, and if it's actually true that it's costful to host locally than outside.
I would want to believe it's costful. I don't know if Sebastian would want to chip in with the numbers that you were mentioning.
Yeah. So I would just do a normal example to make it clear. Because we are coming from technology. It's easy to speak technology, but I believe there are some young girls here, they are coming from a very normal background. They told me either they studied procurement. We are talking mystery. You see, we are talking a lot of jargon because we need to break it down. You see, so think about this. You know China. Okay, China, their products comes from China, right? We also produce some products here in Tanzania. What is happening is that we have so many number of products from China, despite we also produce the same product here. And if you compare the price, what's happening? You find the Chinese is more cheaper than what you are producing here. You get my point? Despite being here, but somehow it's more expensive than what is coming from China. Sometimes there was even tilapia coming from China. It's much cheaper than the tilapia coming from Mwanza. You get my point? So still, I would say, what they are trying to avoid, a lot of fintech and there are other people, they won't buy a server from National Data Center. They'll buy one or two just to tick the compliance. But the processing capacity and other things, they will buy from AWS or Azure or somewhere. Why? Because it's expensive still. Why? Because electricity is expensive, infrastructure is expensive, cooling is expensive. And of course, the data center that we have here, because of the smaller in size, they are yet to have the what we call the multiply effect, that to be able to lower down the price. So the price will be more expensive here than how it is outside there. And this is for all the sector. They would like to host outside. But for the fintech, they have to do it locally. That's when they do some, secondary data center here and there to just showcase. But if you ask them, like, what is our wish, they know where to get the machine because they know what's the price of the machine and how much it costs. But I want also to add on top of where we are going, because now we speak. I want to speak this because I happened to meet Dr. Moses. It was 2012, Dr. Moses. I met Dr. Moses at British Council. We were teaching people about cloud computing and virtualization. I reminded him today, and he was laughing. He said, we were ahead of time. And we were unable to comprehend how will that server within the server will come to happen. You see, now you buy a server which is very small of this size. We used to have a server that came from down to here. That was called the server. And now you have a server of this size which has 100 server inside. And you ask a person that there will be a time that you will have machine inside the machine. And people, they were saying, no, you are just talking mystery. People, they used to mock us. Today we are here and say, we were ahead of time. I mean, even himself doesn't believe. I want to tell this. Now we are talking about Jamstack, right? I appreciate what our government is doing. With all due respect, they are doing a lot. It's not easy to do these things. To develop a country depends also the mind of the people. You cannot go ahead than the mind of the people themselves. So there's a lot of things to pull, the people, the process, the regulation, and everything. But here is what I want to say. Today, if you take your AI, you take your data for your financial, in your office, by the way, if you have a company, if you ask your AI to give you financial statement, it will give everything. It will ask about the TRI. It will ask all the laws of TRI, the pay rates and everything. It will create the profit and loss. It will create the balance sheet. You see, we are going into so much of activity that we're going to feed this machine. Are we together? And everybody wants to use this advantage. Ask the AI, what is happening? AI take that knowledge to whoever that control the AI. That intelligence is gone. So it means they know how many numbers in Tanzania, company which are making so and so. You get my point? Have you ever asked the AI and later it tells you about you? And if you question like, how did you know me? He say, I don't keep the record about you. But you say, you know me. How did you answer this? So they return some information about everything that you give. So what I'm saying here is that if you measure ChatGPT when it came in, and now it is more educated than before, right? So where it's take this information to somebody in China also, if he asks that chat, it will tell a lot of things about Tanzania. This reach about something that is, more serious. Do you get in terms of economic competition and advantage? Because some of this information are intellectual properties. There are some patterns, there are ideas that are also supposed to be secret. And that's why I'm saying we should not reach a point whereby we still build our infrastructure back to the colonial. You get my point. You get my point. We have to think, otherwise we should not just dance every song. We need to be really serious to position ourselves now for the next 10 years. Because if we don't do that, as you wonder now, by next 10 years, you will be shocked what would have changed in this country. So what I want to say is that let's appreciate everything the government is doing at their level we call e-government, automation and everything. But we need to be able to build, data center, the infrastructure that power our digital economy, our sandboxes, our AI models, where we host the things that are local but at almost less cost, so that we build our intelligence. That's where the money is. Our intelligence is retained here and not exported. Because now this infrastructure is exporting us, slowly. And tomorrow we'll miss the competition. So I think I'm trying to speak from the selfish point of view, because if we don't protect what we have, tomorrow we're going to lose everything because of the sake of infrastructure. So for that case, we need to build our own infrastructure. So this call for the government, and we are here. And I'm very blessed to stay with the ladies in this panel. So this call for the government to think strategically about this issue of governance, the governance of data center. Any investor that we're going to do investment in Tanzania, the governance of the data center is critical. I mean, they need a lot of critical eye. Why they do that, and how do we control that? Otherwise, we're gonna, you understand what I mean. And then we come back to the pricing. If we are able to do it at a lower price, everybody will be in the local data center. Means the brain of Tanzania will be hosted locally. The entire brain of thinking will be hosted locally and not being exported. And that means we will have our own way. It's called organizational culture, our culture, the way of handling things, which all goes into the ability of company. We call them intellectual property rights, because the business secret is even how you do things. So if we export everything, it means even Chinese will be able to export us, because they know each and everything. You have no competition, against them. So I think we need to take this more serious and even critical. So it's not just a project that Aisha here come and say, let's talk technology and we think it's technology. It's more than that. It's a digital economy. It's a national issue. This is an issue of National Assembly. It's an issue of a cabinet. It's an issue of boardrooms. It's an issue of whoever inside their home. At university level, people, they're talking about how now the research is difficult. The same about hospital, the same about agriculture, the same about mining, the same about weather. This information, if we release them all to somewhere, we have nothing we are left with. So I think this is a big issue.
A really big issue, and I know that we are laughing, but it's a very, very serious issue with a lot of repercussions across so many different fields. But again, the common theme, data sovereignty and localization, is super important. Now, I know you together with Fatma have mentioned a couple of ways in which the government and regulators can look into seeing how they can make it more effective, but also easy for people to host or localize the data in the country. Now, just to finish off our conversation and to throw this question to Dr. Angelina, it's evident that with the costs and the expenses currently, many organizations continue to rely on foreign hosted services. Now, what measures, in addition to what the previous panelists have spoken, what measures can the government continue to take to encourage greater adoption of local and regional cloud infrastructure while maintaining global interoperability and competitiveness?
Thank you very much. So that's basically a trade-off between digital sovereignty and global competitiveness. So how do we position ourselves in the global markets and ecosystem? When we started our conversation here, Mr. Sebastian mentioned about the number of data centers which are in Tanzania versus what other countries have, and probably you can just establish our position there. So yes, a lot has to be done, but a lot has also been done, because digital transformation is a process. We just don't get there overnight. So yes, there are things that have been done with respect to the infrastructure development, policy and regulation guidelines, and among other things. But I would say it's also important that we ensure issues like regulatory frameworks and guidelines, because this is what determines the playing field rules. So how do we ensure our regulatory frameworks attract investment, but also establishes the rules and guidelines to ensure that our data is safe? Like what has also mentioned, the issue of security of our data and how this data is being used, but whoever stores this data there, because they'll know just so much about us. Where do we draw that line? So it's also very important. But there's something I also mentioned prior about human capacity development. This is very, very important and critical. When we have people like my colleagues here in the panel, you can see how they talk. They are well informed. So imagine if we have a massive population of of people with similar knowledge in our rooms, in our board meetings and so forth, you can just establish the level of decisions that will be made, because this also has a multiplier effect in so many things, from the private sector and even the government. So it's very, very important to ensure capacity building to our people. But also infrastructure development. Like I previously mentioned, the government has been doing a lot. We have installed optic fiber national ICT broadband backbone throughout the country, because we want to ensure we have reliable communication within our country, but also improve last mile connectivity. But we are also expanding. We want to ensure that we are able to establish communication to landlocked countries, because we are privileged. We are bordered by this ocean, so we have submarine cables landing in our country, so we can be able to support other countries, and this is business, it's investment. Yes, yes, yes. So yes, but also we are also ensuring communication throughout the country through communication towers. We don't want you, when you're traveling, for example, in an SGR or a bus, somewhere in between you lose communication. We should have seamless communication throughout the country. So yes, efforts are being done by the government to ensure communication in rural and remote areas is being done. This is part of inclusivity. We don't want to leave anyone behind. So I would say it sums up. There are a number of efforts that needs to be done, from the regulatory, investment in digital infrastructure, capacitating our people, all with in collaboration. I would say collaboration is one of the key factors. Us as the government alone cannot do everything. We need the private sector on board. So these joint efforts are very critical to ensure we reach the promised land. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Angelina. I think you've wrapped that, the conversation for us very well. I think from our experts' insights, I think it's very evident that data center localization is very, very important, but there's a number of things that we still need to do as a country, we need to do as stakeholders to ensure that we do really arrive at the promised land. Now, before I thank my panelists, I don't know if we have any questions from the audience. 1 minute for a round of questions. Okay, thank you. 5 minutes for questions.
All right. Do we have, where did we have a hand? We had a hand right here.
Hello. My name is Gloria Kabendela. My name is Gloria Kabendela. I am a public health analyst, and I'm also working with youth with East Central and Southern Africa Health Community. So everything that was mentioned today with the panelists is very crucial and important. I can confirm, even I didn't know a lot of things, I just heard them here. But my question is not only to the panelists, to everybody who is in here. Like, how are we going to improve the awareness, especially to the final consumers? Because me, as a final consumer, I really need to understand the legal issues. I mean, the localization. I was shocked, actually. I was very shocked with the localization issue. So can you guys make us aware in that? Thank you.
How do we enhance awareness? Can we take one more question and then any other hand? Do we have any other hand right here? Thank you very much. I'm going to ask you to stand up, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, the moderator. Great job. Panelists, my question is straightforward. As we are speaking about the rise of African data centers and cloud infrastructure building, and of course, my friends say that the government is doing a lot, and we have to praise what the government is doing. I agree with you. They are trying, but I'll have to pose this question to all of us, especially to the panelists. If you can rate the pace, not Tanzania, I want to generalize it to the African countries, investment to the rest of the world, because I know now the things are moving very fast, and we'll have to think beyond our capacity, because I think we are all witnesses of what had happened between America and China. And I think we were together with Asha, and we posed this question to the Americans on the DeepSeek issue and how Americans were prepared to counter the DeepSeek. And then coming into Africa, thinking the way we think, the way we see the world is moving, how are we well equipped? How ready are we to go with the rest of the world? So if you can just rate the pace of African countries vis-a-vis the rest of the world. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you take one last one?
Yes.
Or should we take the two
Yes.
and then we move?
We can take one last one and then we can.
The last one is
allow
from me.
Okay.
I was just basically going to talk about the rise of data centers and what we're seeing as a backlash in some of the Western countries with regards to environmental and health sensitivities, and also connected to the awareness question that she raised in terms of where the data centers are actually being placed and planted. How involved are those people to understand the repercussions of data centers being in those places? Especially now, of course, we understand it's lower bandwidth than they can generate. But as we are advancing, how are we now analyzing and informing the people about the repercussions of having data centers in those spaces? Or what are we doing to mitigate those specific challenges that might cause a lot of harm in the future, because we don't necessarily have the methods in place to navigate as well as to mitigate those specific harms in the future? All right.
Thank you. So we've got 3 questions. One on general awareness of all this information, especially for the end consumer. And then we've got someone who wants us to rate the African continent against the global market. But also, last but also I think very, very important is that, yes, we've all said that it's very important for us to localize. We need that data sovereignty, but have we talked about the environmental repercussions and then the awareness of the people around these places where the data centers are? Wow. Any of my panelists want to take up these questions? Feel free to pick any and share your insights with us. Thank you.
Maybe I'll start with the one for awareness. I think when it comes to what we're discussing, most of the time, as Doctor was saying, there's quite a few people who actually understand the technical expertise. I think as a consumer, as someone at the end, you don't have to have all the technical aspects, but if you're in the sector, you need to understand. So if you're in the health sector, you need to have a clear understanding of that sector. But when it comes to public awareness, I would wish for awareness to start at school level, for people to be trained, for them to have understanding. I think Noel is here from PDPC. He's just shared in another panel that he went around doing awareness to ICT teachers in the country. And so starting at that critical point whereby people are learning, going to university, but also public sensitization. And I think every one of us actually should be able to create this awareness. It's not just the government that should do it. It's not just maybe tech and media convergence. This is part of the awareness platform that they're doing, but we all need to say, I would say, like, be vigilant, like build that awareness to the people around us. If you understand the repercussion of your data, giving access to that data, educate your family, it starts there. Like, that is how we're able to have that ripple effect. And of course, then build onto that to schools, to university, and especially to university, because I think by the time you're at university, you're able to comprehend a lot of things. You're able to take a lot of things. I'll also wish for awareness to go for every ministry, every institution, for them to take that awareness within their respective ministry when it comes to technology, when it comes to data, when it comes to AI, and for every ministry to have some sort of awareness in the respective sector, that would help. I think I'll give an example. The recent BOT did the certified financial educators, and you have seen the ripple effect. You open your social media, unakutana na CFE telling you about investment. It was just a simple initiative, lakini the effect has been seen. So similar, each ministry, I think, should come with a way on how they can build public awareness. Because as a ministry, they have country level, I would say, overview, and they're able to pass that awareness easily. And maybe with regard to the other question, Halila spoke about climate and the environment and health and the people around. So I think, yes, currently I think, as you say, that we don't have maybe much happening at currently. However, I think as we're going into the future and we want to have this data centers that have that ability. I think I recently saw one of the video in social media saying that maybe the future of real estate investment is in public data centers. That is where the money is going to be. However, most, I would say currently, there is quite a number of framework when it comes to green ICT and how data centers need to be. However, I think as a country, we have the rules that I spoke about. Some ways speak about some aspect of it. And I think recently I read a report by TCRA. They have I don't know if it's a magazine or called report, but they say they're adopting or they're pushing for green ICT data centers in the country. However, I'm not so sure. Halila is shaking. I'm not so sure the implementation, but I would hope that there are proper regulations in place when it comes to the communities around, when it comes to ensuring that people do not suffer impact, much as we're pushing for development of data centers, but we don't also frustrate the communities around. And I'm sure that is something that can be worked on. Halila, we can try. To work around it. And when it comes to climate, I think Sebastian spoke about data center requiring a lot of energy, water. I think in South Africa, there are a lot of data center, and there is, I think I had like a video in a certain specific, I think, region. They were complaining that the data center is consuming a lot of water, just that for the cooling, and water is becoming a problem. And so it's going to be important to have clear planning and strategically, I would say like strategic areas whereby we're able to keep these data centers. I think we had in Kenya, Microsoft wanted to keep a data center. It didn't happen because energy seemed to be a problem. I think it's only said in Ethiopia where they have the Renaissance Dam is where you could keep that level of like data center. And so as a country, I would say we need to plan ahead, have policies that speak to that, identify strategic area where we are able to keep the kind of data center that would need this consumption, and keep proper governance in place.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll just touch a bit on the awareness part, and then I'll go further to the issues of data centers and its impact. On one, the awareness part, I think, yes, the government, we have a lot to do in terms of informing our people on the digital transformation initiatives, one, but also how are they able to use and benefit from the existing initiatives. So that we can have campaigns, we can use mainstream media, we can use social media, but yes, we need to have more programs that can reach more people, especially in rural and remote areas, so that they are aware that there are these systems that have been developed and they can actually facilitate their way of life. And this can also start even in schools, have programs for digital awareness. Yes, I'm aware there are initiatives by the Ministry of Education in terms of ICT, but yes, more can be done to improve, yes, the awareness. But moving to the impacts of having these data centers, as we move and transition to AI data center, maybe I'll narrow down to two important things. One is the energy, which has already been spoken. I think this has to be overemphasized. A lot of energy is being required to process this data, because with AI, just goes hand in hand with data processing. Now, when you need this more power to process your data, you also need more energy for cooling. It uses a lot of energy, it produces a lot of heat, and in turn you have to cool it. So overall, there's a lot of carbon footprint being left. So how are we able to build energy efficient systems, green systems, to power, as much as we want to invest more in these data centers, but how do we set the frameworks and also invest in energy that is very supportive to our global ecosystem? But something else I wanted to mention on the same, sorry, on someone talked about rating, on rating ourselves. I would say, as much as our I wouldn't mention numbers, but no, I wouldn't go there. I would say as much as our rating might not be high as other developing countries, we should also reflect where we're coming from. We didn't start on the same level playing field as the rest. So we are coming up, we are catching up, but the good thing is we are leapfrogging, actually. There are some steps we have skipped to reach where we are. So I would say, just because we aren't there yet, that we should be, yeah, we're moving forward. And I would say one of the important things is that we have an advantage of having a youth population. And the youth of today isn't the youth of back then. It's well-informed, competitive, and aggressive. Yes, so definitely our growth rate will be up there, up there. So I'm very optimistic, very, very optimistic of the future of Tanzania and Africa in general. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Mr. Sebastian?
Yes, thank you very much. This afternoon we had a meeting at the lunch side, and we are talking with some youth, and we were talking about this mindset, and I appreciate that today's youth, they don't think as we are. In fact, they say, you guys, it's like you failed and we want to repair where you were. So they have their own language, and they, some of them, they're here, and I really appreciate them because they correct us. In fact, she told me that they are looking to mentor us. These youth, they think we have problem, and instead of we mentor them, they want also to be given chance for them to mentor people like us. That's how far they have gone. So am I right or not? Yeah, they're here.
We're always open to learning. Thank you.
So, so just to add, I don't want to repeat on what has already been said. Fatima said it well, and Doctor said it well. On the construction, actually, there are a number of considerations. One, we have some acts which are very enough for the environment in terms of building and where to build. This guide even if you want to build the industry. So that is what guided the environmental assessment. That's environmental impact assessment. Number one, that will give you the clearance on location and the resources which are needed and the rest of the impact. That's number one. But number two, for a data center, there are a lot of, to have tier 3, because here we talk data center and we talk tier 3. These are almost two different things. So tier 3 is actually very heavy data center requirement. It requires a lot of redundancy. You need 2 TANESCO sources which are not coming from one center. It's like you have 66 kilowatts at least connecting to that house from different stations. And also you need to have at least 4 generators, That's parallel linked so that if this fails, that starts. So, and the cooling, everything is redundant. Everything is redundant. Fire suppression, everything is redundant. So it's actually a heavy factory. It's not a data center. It's actually a factory. Let's take it like a factory. So inside the way it is built, there's a lot of compliance checklist which rates you now. The DSS, the PCI, these are the compliance which rates to say now you are okay to be called tier 3. And this take a lot of consideration in terms